Victor was 35 years old and deep in debt. Not just minor financial difficulties, but a concrete, mortal debt to a man who preferred sending people into the woods with axes rather than negotiating. The cause of all of Victor's and his unwilling partner Stepan's troubles was one man. Game Warden Ignat the Iron Volkov. Their last hunt, the riskiest and most profitable, had ended in disaster. They had tracked a rare black sable and secured a sack full of young marrow antlers, worth a fortune on the black market. But Ignat was waiting for them at the edge of the taiga. Alone, as always silent, leaning on his old but perfectly clean SKS rifle. He didn't shoot. He simply took the haul. Stepan, an old taiga wolf in his 50s, took it philosophically. The taiga doesn't forgive greed. Ignat is the taiga. But for Victor, it meant ruin. The goods belonged to a city crime boss nicknamed the Master. The Master gave Victor 1 week to return either the goods or their cost, tripled for the penalty. Victor could do neither. They were sitting in a smoke-filled winter cabin, 3 days from civilization. The night was cold and quiet, only the crackle of dry wood in the iron stove broke the darkness. "We have to take him out," Victor whispered, wiping sweat from his brow with a dirty sleeve. His eyes were feverishly bright. "Ignat is the only one who knows where the goods are. And the only one standing in the way." Stepan slowly sipped his hot, strong tea. "Ignat? You're not planning to kill a roe deer, Vitya. You're planning to kill the forest that raised him. He's not a man. He is the law of this place." But Victor had no choice. Behind them stood the Master. Before them stood only Iron Ignat. And that warden had to disappear. Ignat Volkov was a legend, seemingly born of the taiga itself. He was around 40, but his face, etched by wind and frost, looked older. He never raised his voice. His movements were economical and silent. He didn't just know the forest, he was its consciousness and memory. To Ignat, poachers were not just criminals, but parasites, desecrating what was sacred. His warden section stretched for hundreds of kilometers, and he guarded it alone, relying only on his old SKS, his like a dog, Aza, and a knowledge of the terrain that bordered on the mystical. When Victor and Stepan began their journey, Ignat already knew. Not because he saw them. He felt the change in the forest. Aza had barked restlessly toward the south the day before, and an old cedar near his cabin dropped a cone out of season. Ignat knew. The balance was broken. The poachers began to scour his section, leaving cautious but careless tracks. Victor, in his haste, snapped a young spruce, and Stepan failed to fully hide a tin can. To Ignat, these mistakes were louder than cannon shots. He knew what they were looking for. And he knew what they planned. Ignat sat by his fire, calmly cleaning his rifle. He wasn't a hunter. He was a guardian. And he was ready for the challenge. The poacher's plan was simple. Lure Ignat to a specific location. The Black Hearth, an old, half-ruined winter cabin situated in a narrow, rocky gorge, far from all official trails. Ignat knew the place. It served as his emergency shelter. They left a bait there. A small cache with fake sable pelts and a note about a major catch upriver. They were certain that greed, or, in Ignat's case, his overwhelming sense of duty, would compel him to come. The cabin, the Black Hearth, got its name from the age-old soot that blackened the stone hearth. It stood in a rock trap. The only path to it led through a narrow passage between two cliffs. The perfect spot for an ambush. The poachers arrived 2 days before Ignat was expected. Victor was agitated. Stepan was grim and focused. "Look, Stepanik, right here," Victor pointed at the ground. "He'll enter, see the bait. And right here." Their trap was primitive but effective. A double cable snare. They camouflaged a thin steel cable stretched at ankle height, which, when tripped, would release a heavy, water-smoothed granite boulder from a ledge. Death would be instantaneous and look like an accident. Stepan worked on the cable. His hands, scarred from barbed wire and old nets, moved with surgical precision. He used natural moss and dry branches to hide the cable and spent a full day camouflaging the boulder so it blended with the background. Victor, meanwhile, sat on a rock with his rifle, his nerves frayed. He didn't know what was worse. Waiting, or knowing that they were here, under this eternal, indifferent sky, preparing murder. "You fidget too much, Vitya," Stepan noted, rubbing earth over a fresh boot print. "The Taiga hears the hurried." "I don't want the master hearing my name," Victor snapped. It wasn't an answer, it was his only excuse. The day Ignat was expected arrived. The poachers took their positions. Stepan on a high rock outcrop overlooking the entire passage, Victor in the dense thicket on the opposite side, his finger resting on the trigger of his rifle, which he held less for shooting and more for comfort. The hours dragged slowly. The sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows that seemed alive. The psychological pressure began to erode their patience. Victor took out a cigarette. "Is he even coming? Maybe he figured it out." "If he figured it out, we are already dead, Vitya," Stepan replied quietly, not taking his binoculars off the passage. Victor, unable to restrain himself, lit the cigarette. He immediately stubbed it out on the rock, but the thin, sharp smell of tobacco smoke had already dissolved into the clean, pine-scented air. Stepan felt panic rising. The scent. In the taiga, where all smells are immediately filtered and dispersed by the wind, tobacco smoke is a red flag. Ignat would smell it from hundreds of meters away. "What have you done, idiot?" Stepan was furious. "Relax. The wind is blowing our way," Victor hissed. But Stepan knew better. The wind in a gorge is deceptive, it swirls and creates vortices. After a few tense minutes, Stepan noticed the first real sign of penetration. On an old pine tree, 10 meters from the cabin, a tiny, fresh notch appeared. It was almost invisible, but Stepan knew Ignat's handiwork. It was a marker. Ignat was marking the path. He wasn't just following their tracks, he was confirming their presence. And that meant the warden already knew they were here. And he was coming not as prey, but as the hunter. The next morning brought the betrayal of the elements. In mid-October, when the days were usually dry and cold, the sky suddenly darkened, and thick, wet snow began to fall. It wasn't a winter blanket, but an anomaly that, in a few hours, covered all tracks, hid the trap, and made the terrain unrecognizable. Stepan looked at the snow with near-religious dread. "The taiga is hiding him," he muttered. The snow completely obscured the thin cable, but it also made the boulder's activation unpredictable. The stone could slip on its own, or the cable could freeze solid. The trap had become unreliable. Worse, the snowfall triggered animal panic. A roar came from the river that belonged to neither a moose nor a marrow. It was a transient bear, Shatten, caught off guard by the early winter. Huge, hungry, and irritated. Victor panicked. "We have to leave. It's a sign." "No, Vitya," Stepan spoke firmly for the first time. "This is a test. If we leave now, the master will find us faster. We must wait for him before the snow stops." The snow turned into freezing sleet. Everything became slippery, wet, and unbearably cold. The poachers' nerves were giving way. They were masters at hunting animals, but utterly unprepared for war with the taiga, which was actively defending its son. Ignat did not appear, but his presence became tangible. It pressed down on the poachers like low atmospheric pressure. By evening, as the rain turned to freezing drizzle, Victor decided to check their cache. In an abandoned shed, half a kilometer from the Black Hearth, they had left supplies. Salted fish, ammunition, and a thermos of vodka. Victor returned half an hour later, his face deathly pale. "Everything. Everything is gone," his voice trembled. The cartridges are punctured, the powder is wet. The fish is scattered. And the vodka. The thermos was empty. Inside, a small, rolled-up piece of birch bark lay. Scrawled on it were the words. Fire burns long. Greed fades fast. Ignat had come and gone like a ghost. He didn't kill them and didn't take everything. He took only what gave them comfort and the ability to shoot. It wasn't just sabotage. It was a psychological strike. Ignat was showing that he could get close, see them, and leave unnoticed. He stripped them of their confidence, making them vulnerable and forcing panic. Stepan, assessing the damage, realized Ignat had used only a few hours of the snowstorm to sneak in and execute the sabotage. His knowledge of the wind, snow, and terrain was phenomenal. Victor was sitting, trembling with cold and fury, when Stepan tugged at his sleeve. Look! Ignat appeared in a narrow passage. He walked calmly, rifle not raised, his dog Ozza trotting beside him, unusually quiet. He was wearing an old but perfectly clean sheepskin coat. His movements betrayed neither fatigue nor haste. He was as calm as a frozen glacier. Ignat approached the gorge entrance. He looked around. For a moment, his gaze lingered on the very cedar where Victor had left the smell of the cigarette. Then he turned his head and looked directly at the cabin. He took a step. Ozza, unbothered by the trap, suddenly whined and sharply pulled him to the side. Ignat, trusting the dog instinctively, stepped right. The cable, hidden under the snow, sprang. There was a sharp, metallic click. The boulder, weighing perhaps half a ton, tore off the ledge. It flew right past the spot where Ignat had stood a second before. The boulder crashed into the opposite cliff with a deafening, shattering sound, breaking into pieces. Silence. Ignat stood, leaning against the rock, his face expressing nothing. Victor, enraged, rushed out of his cover, forgetting all caution. You! Son of a bitch! He raised his rifle and fired. The bullet, sent by a trembling hand, grazed the rock a meter away from Ignat. Ignat did not return fire. He vanished. While Victor reloaded, Stepan shouted. Run! He knows where we are now. But it was too late. The crash of the boulder and Victor's shot gave Ignat exactly what he needed. Knowledge of their precise location and their panic. Ignat, using his absolute silence and knowledge of the terrain, instantly switched from defense to offense. He didn't charge them. He ran towards the river, a kilometer down the gorge. 5 minutes later, the poachers heard the deafening, ominous crack of wood. Then, a few seconds later, a second one. Ignat, using old lumberjack tricks, had sawed two of the tallest, oldest cedars that hung over the only escape route, turning them into a barrier. He's trapped us. Victor realized. The only remaining path was through the black hearth itself and then up the slippery, steep slope, where they had to cling to frozen roots and rocks. Ignat, like a spectral conductor, directed their flight. He wasn't chasing them. He was herding them into natural traps set by the taiga itself. Icy sinkholes, slick moss, and soil undermined by marsh. Victor tripped and dropped his rifle in the snow. The flight led them to the upland swamp, a bog dangerous even in summer. Now, covered with a thin layer of ice and snow, it was a deadly labyrinth. Victor, consumed by madness, didn't listen to Stepan. I have to find him. He took my goods. The master. The master can't save you now. Stepan shouted. Ignat wants you to drown in your own mistakes. Stepan, following his instincts, carefully skirted the swamp edge, moving along tussocks. Victor, however, lunged straight across the icy surface. A crunch. Victor fell waist-deep into the icy muck. He screamed. Stepan ran up. He could have pulled him out. But at that moment, he saw Ignat. The warden stood at the edge of the swamp, 10 meters away from them, calm as a statue. He wasn't aiming. He was just watching. Stepan, the old Taiga man, suddenly understood. This was not just a hunt. This was a judgment. Victor was guilty not only of poaching but of desecrating the very law of the Taiga. Stepan looked at Victor, who was choking and begging for help, and then looked at Ignat, whose eyes held only the age-old indifference of the forest. Stepan made his choice. He slowly took 2 steps back. "Forgive me, Vitya," Stepan whispered. "Ignat is right. This is not my war." He turned and walked away without looking back, leaving Victor's cries and the warden's deadly silence behind him. Stepan walked for 3 days, avoiding trails and feeding only on what the land gave him. He was exhausted but calm. He had left behind not only Victor but his former life. On the 4th day, he stumbled upon a small Taiga village. He didn't linger. He knew he had to keep moving, searching for a place where he could live without breaking the iron law. As for Ignat, he remained standing at the edge of the swamp until the cries subsided. When the water calmed, he approached the open water. All that remained of Victor was his backpack, snagged on a snag. Ignat pulled the backpack out. It contained nothing but spent cartridges and a waterlogged pack of cigarettes. Ignat returned to the black hearth. He carefully dismantled the trap, cleared away the remains of the boulder, and camouflaged the spot so perfectly it was impossible to find. He found Victor's rifle, left in the snow, and buried it under the roots of an old spruce. As Ignat walked away, Azza trotted calmly beside him. The snow stopped. The sun broke through the branches. The taiga had regained its age-old, deep silence. Game Warden Ignat Volkov had restored his peace, proving that the only law that truly works in the taiga is the law of balance, and he himself was its relentless executor.